Welcome guys to today's show, and today it's all about light meters. So hopefully you guys are excited. And I'm gonna show you kind of how when to use a light meter, how to use a light meter, but also importantly when not to use a light meter, because you know it's a great the light meters are great devices and definitely something you want to learn to use if you're a cinematographer, if you're like I said, working anywhere basically in the film industry, video industry probably too. Like for television and stuff, it can be very helpful. But again, it's got its uses, but it's also not what I think what a lot of people or people who are beginning kind of are thinking what this is for. So first thing maybe I'll get into is kind of just there's different kinds of light meters. So let me here just kind of show you guys. I'm going to show you. This is like this kind of a basic one. This is my first light meter ever that I got about 20 years ago. It's the Sekonic Studio Deluxe. It's the #2 version. But anyways, you can pick these up for used even for like $80, $60. So you can find this on eBay and other places like that. But there's other light meters too. There's, for example, here we have one that's from also Sekonic actually. That is the Speedmaster L-308S-U Flashmate, and this is a great light meter. It's kind of, I would say, what's being used by a lot of professionals, like big budget films and stuff. Cinematographers will be using these, but doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have it. It's great because it's just kind of big, robust, it's more durable, has a nice, very clear to see digital display and all that stuff. The batteries in this thing last forever. So that's one of the good things about it. Like literally, you put the batteries in there, and if you're using it every day, it's gonna last you for weeks. So that's a cool thing about these ones. But they're, I would say the big disadvantage of this is just they're expensive. They're $600 this one. So again, not for everybody. This one, like I said, you can pick up very cheaply, but it's analog. Now the good thing about this one is it's also very like sturdy and it's gonna last you a long time. But also the cool thing about it is that this one doesn't actually require any batteries whatsoever, if you can believe that. I've had this again when I bought it. You can calibrate it, kind of. It's very simple to do every few years, but literally, I mean, like I said, even if you don't calibrate, I actually haven't calibrated mine in a few years, so we'll see just how accurate it is. But this one, again, is gonna no batteries. Is gonna basically do what any other light meters allows you to do, without basically the only, I would say, disadvantage of this one is that it's maybe not as sensitive to very very small amounts of light. So if you're shooting with really high ISOs, that might not be the light meter for you. If you're shooting like with some of these new cameras that shoot in really high ISOs. Or basically with small amounts of light. That's where this thing might not be as handy. The other one, the Sekonic, the Lightmaster, that one is a lot more sensitive. But I also have another one here, and this one is this is the iPhone, but this is the light meter. It's literally this little thing called Lumu Light. I did a video about this and some of the other light meters, quickly talking about it. But anyways, it's this little attachment. You right now they only have a version for the iOS, so it only works with the iPhone. But anyways, you hook it up to your iPhone and then start up your iPhone. It's gonna automatically start up the app for you, and you can see this is kind of how the app looks. And you just go to you can actually measure not just the light intensity but also the color of your light. So that's a pretty cool thing. So let me actually show you here, guys, kind of how it looks, so you can see it better. And yeah, this is kind of more or less how it looks. You can see, and this is it. This is the little piece, and then this is how the app looks. So it's kind of cool because, like I said, you can, it works amazingly well. That's the cool thing about it. Anyways, so that's this light meter, and then this is the other one that we're going to be using today. I'm not going to be using the Lightmaster because I don't have it in the studio with me today, but also because it's very expensive, and I know a lot of people don't have these, so that's the reason why. But anyways, I'm going to be using one of these two. And now getting back into it, so what are basically these light meters for? I would say the first thing is you're just measuring amounts of light, and it's, some people will tell you sometimes, well, you don't need that because all cameras have a built-in light meter. And yes, but there's a big difference in the light meter that's built into your camera and that's actually in a light meter. Light meter will direct basically incident or basically directly the light. Like I can be here and I can be measuring this light source, right? So that's the big difference with this. Whereas your camera's meter is actually measuring the reflected light. So once the light, let's say, hits my face, bounces off, and it goes there, that's what it measures. Also, it measures the whole scene, right? You can do spot metering, so you can meter like certain areas. But it's sometimes it might not be so convenient. It also means you have to have a camera there to measure it. And like I said, when you're measuring reflected light, if there's, for example, some surfaces, like if you're shooting things with, let's say, scenes out in the snow, or somebody's clothing is very reflective, let's say, or for example, absorbs a lot of light, or certain spectrum of the light too, and that's going to throw off your, could throw off basically the light reading in your camera, or could create other basically problems. But the biggest thing I would say is this, is when you go, for example, when you're preparing to do a film, you're not going to be going around and walking with, basically with a big camera, right? Let me take these off for now. So yeah, you're not going to be walking around with a big camera everywhere, and you're not going to be measuring everything. And then not only that, but then you would have to have an appropriate lens and all that stuff. Well, before you even take out your camera, I would say you want to kind of start building your scene, your lighting, or see what the lighting is like at a certain location. And that's where a light meter comes in handy. All you need is a light meter, or in this case, this little Lumu thing in your phone. Now, also another quick thing I'll tell you guys, this thing is amazing, this little light meter. Now, it's not perfect. Like I said, the advantages of this one is that it's smaller, it's cheaper. It's like $300, but right now you can get it for $250 on certain places, so check the links in the description of this video. And this thing is, like I said, not just a light meter, but color meter, plus it's very small. Now, the disadvantage of this is that to use it, you have to have an iPhone or iOS device. And then that means the battery is basically whatever amount of battery you have on the phone. If it dies, then it's useless, right? Whereas, like I said, this one, it's going to work for forever, basically. And it doesn't require batteries. And the Speedmaster, the more expensive one, is gonna last you for weeks, so basically one battery. Anyway, so like I said, with a light meter, you can go to a location. So in this case, your iPhone, probably have it with you, and this little light meter attachment, or this thing, and you carry this in your pocket, and you can go to location, do location scouting, and you can already see what's the lighting situation like in there. And kind of, I'll show you right now how we're gonna build the scene in here that I have, basically, which is kind of like a typical scene for, I would say, for an interview, because I'm here and I'm in front of the camera. So kind of, let me just show you guys what kind of a lighting setup we have here today. And it's a typical sort of a 4-point lighting setup for an interview. So let me just show you here. Where is this? Oh, I don't think I need to copy this thing. Hold on. Okay, hold on, guys. I'm gonna quickly. I forgot to do something. I thought I was ready for the show, but I am ready. I just forgot to copy one little thing. So just stay with me for a second, while I'll show you kind of some of the other basically light meters here that you guys can see. So where is it? Too many things happening all at once. And where is it? Now, by the way, if you have any questions right now for me, just let me know, okay? Where is it? Okay, I don't see it up here. Anyways, I'll be back in a second. All right, I am back. Sorry for this. I'm doing the whole show today by myself, so that's kind of how it goes sometimes. Anyways, let me show you what we got here. So, got our lighting diagram, and I'm kind of just take you guys step by step with this. Oh. All right, so here's our lighting diagram, and we've got, like I said, we got 4 lights, right? So 4 separate lights that you guys can see up here, and basically with we have our key light. And kind of when you start working with a light meter, you're probably going to be first working with the key light. So you can see here's our just very simple diagram. Here's our camera. This is me here, and I have my key light here to my right, and I have my fill light here on the left side. Then I have a background light that's actually lighting the background behind me, and the hair light. And I'm gonna actually show you now, kind of in for real, kind of how this looks. So again, background or hair light, key light, and now I'm gonna jump to. I should actually think how to do this. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna turn off the other lights here that I have, and I'm gonna also turn off one more light here in the back. So hold on. All right, so I just have a key light right now. Just have a key light going on, and this is how I look when I have just a key light. And kind of usually you'll want to work with just a key light first, because the reason why I'm saying with a key light first is because usually because a key light is going to be the strongest light. And so that's kind of how you're going to be using a light meter. Now this the kind of my way of working with a light meter is varies. I'm saying the basic thing I'll show you how to use a light meter is everybody does it the same way, but the approach of using a light meter or metering light and setting up your scene will vary. But this is where I'm going to show you, for example, how the advantages of a light meter. Let's say you show up to a location, you still don't have your camera package rented, especially when you're working on bigger films. You're not going to have your camera or a big camera, and you're going to, or let's say anamorphic lenses and all that stuff, and you're not going to be dragging that stuff around with you, especially not when you're going weeks before for a location scout. But let's say you're there at a location, and right now in here we have an actual artificial light set up. But let's say this is just a natural light. Let's say there's a window there, and this is kind of the amount of light that falls in the middle of the day, and you're planning to shoot there. Let's say from let's say a certain at a certain hour. Let's say at that location. Well, you're gonna take your light meter, and all you're gonna do is you're gonna point it. Basically, you're gonna be where your subject is gonna be. So you kind of more or less start, let's say, with the director planning. Okay, this is where the actor is gonna be standing. We'll probably have one camera there, maybe another angle here, that kind of stuff. But you don't have to worry about the cameras. First, you want to see, well, is there going to be enough light at this location? And let's say, can I use that natural light that's falling off the windows? Or do I have to rely on getting, let's say, some other big lights and, actually faking, let's say, sunlight coming in through a window or things like that? Or if you just simply have, let's say, some actual practicals there at the location, you can use that. And then this is also the same thing as when you first show up on a set. When you first show up on a movie set as a director of photography, again, while your camera crew and your camera first AC and second AC, they're building the camera for you. You as a DP, you already got to get the thing going. I mean, I would even say you want to show up on set even before the camera package shows up. And you want to start working with your lighting team, your key grip, gaffer, and kind of communicate with them quickly how you want the scene to be. So in this case, let's say we're doing an interview setup, and you're telling them, okay, there's going to be a guy sitting here. I want that key light to be up here. It's going to be usually, I'm saying the key light is the strongest light. Not always. I'll show you another example of that. But anyway, so they set up your key light for you. We tell them, let's say I want a Keynote flow or something like that. In this case, I have a little KMTV long or strip LED light. I think that's what it's called. Anyways, doesn't matter. We have a key light up here. You then show up here while let's say your camera is still being ready, being prepared. And all you're going to do is press this little button here. In the case of this light meter, if you're using the Lumu light, you're pressing the volume buttons. Doesn't matter which one it is. So I'll measure first with this one. Now here's where you can see also another advantage. This one has this little rotatable thing head. So I can point this, and you want to kind of always point the dome, have it more or less where your subject's going to be, but point it at your light. So I'm pointing there at my light, and I'm going to just press the button here. And kind of, and right now I'm getting a little bit of light here from my computer, which I have up here, so I'll block off maybe that light, and I'm getting, what is there, just above 80. So here, let me show you guys. Here's the reading I'm getting. So I don't know if you guys can see, because now it's a little dark, but this little arrow, like basically when I'm pressing it, I have a marker here, so I can press this. So that shows me in foot candles how much light I actually, what do you call it? How much light my light meter read, right? So if I press it again, you can see now it's lower. Now it's dropped to like 40, right? So now I'm going to point it again. Let me see if I can do it while I'm doing this and showing you guys. 80, so there it is. It jumped up to 80, so this is where I pointed it at my key light. So I know that my key light is at 80, right? 80 foot candles. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this light meter. So let me just start it up here. So I got to start up the phone. Come on, iPhone, unlock. Okay, here it is. And you can see, here's the app. So by the way, when you get the Lumu light, you install it, you're automatically going to prompt you to install the app, and then it will start up the app for you. So anyway, so this is the app here. And what I want to do now is I want to point this. So in this case, I'm going to just invert it, because I want the Lumu light to be pointing there at the key light. So I'm going to invert it here, and I'm going to just do a light reading. And here's the difference that it's going to show you. In Lumu Light, it's automatically going to show you what your aperture should be, and according to all your other settings. In the other light meter, you kind of have to do that manually. Lumu Light, you have a lot more other settings, right? Too. You can, for example, go to here. For example, you can go, like I said, chromosity. You can do a lot of things like that. Color temperature. You can measure all that other cool stuff. You can also go to luminance. I can see, and basically this is, I think, foot candles. What settings? No, this is foot candles. So let's go back now. So if I measure again, so now it's showing me basically 6.4 foot candles I'm getting here. So you have different basically ways of measuring light, and that's the kind of cool thing about it, right? But anyways, here you can show me right now with my camera settings. And my camera settings, I'm shooting on the Blackmagic Ursa Mini. And with my camera settings, it's basically telling me I'm shooting at ISO 800, shutter angle 180 is usually the typical shutter angle, and this is for broadcast. So I'm shooting 30 frames per second. This is NTSC broadcast. So it's telling me with these settings, my aperture should be 5.6. That's basically what it's telling me to get the proper exposure from my key light. Here's what with this light meter how it works. So I have, like I said, if this one's not illuminated, so maybe it might be a little harder for you guys to see, but anyways, I'm shooting at ISO 800. So I have this little dial here. You have like multiple dials here that you can turn. So I have this one dial here. If I grab this, where I adjust my ISO. See this little window there? I don't know how clearly you guys can see it, but hopefully you can. That little window here, that little opening, that actually is what shows you the ISO. So I set this to 800. Now it's telling me the foot candles is the 80 here. Is it foot candles? No, yeah, foot candles, but it's the different scale basically. So it's foot candles is at 80. So I can go now and set this little arrow here to 80. So where do we have it? Here we have it. So I'll set this to 80. And I know I'm shooting at basically 1/60th of a shutter, because 1/60th basically shutter speed. But because my camera operates in shutter angles, it basically at 30 frames per second, 180-degree shutter means double my frame rate. So that means that I'm getting 100, basically 1/60th of a second. So 1/60th of a second, it kind of shows you here. And here's where, like I said, maybe the disadvantages of like a manual light meter like this one is you really got to go in and, like I said, kind of each time kind of calculate it and see what it actually shows you. So it shows me at 1/60th of a second, it shows me 5.6 pretty much. f5.6 a little bit over, right? A little bit over, like a small difference. It says maybe a little bit more than f5.6. And look at this. Lumu light meter, that's what it shows me. But it just shows me, that's where like the newer digital light meters like this one or the Lightmaster from Sekonic are going to be handy because they automatically, based on your camera settings, show you what your aperture should be. Now, why would you want to set these things and not the aperture? Well, usually you're going to be adjusting the aperture because ISO, especially when you're shooting with cinema cameras, and again, that's where kind of an advantage of using a light meter is that when you're shooting with other cameras, basically there are like cinema cameras. In this case, like I said, I'm using the Blackmagic Ursa Mini. When you're shooting with those cameras, you're usually going to be, like I said, shooting at the native ISO. Kind of how you, back in the day, people used to shoot on film. Like when we used to shoot on film, you would get a film stock. You would decide on a particular film stock, and you would probably shoot the whole film or majority of the film on that one film stock because it would give you a specific look. Well, that meant that you were stuck on a certain ISO. So let's say ISO 400 and whatever. Then that means you could not change your ISO. And when you really want to take the advantage of your cinema camera, in this case the Blackmagic Ursa Mini, you want to usually shoot at the native ISO because that's where you're going to get the best color rendition, widest dynamic range, all that stuff. And for example, the Ursa Mini 4.6K, if you shoot at ISO 800, which is a native ISO of this sensor, you're going to get the nicest colors, but also the dynamic range is really nice. It's 15 stops. The second you start changing the ISO, you're really killing the dynamic range, and you're basically eliminating the advantages, you could say, of that camera. So that's what I'm saying is where also you'll see a lot of cinematographers, once they like working with a certain, back in the day it was a film stock, now it's sort of like a certain image sensor, or basically certain camera that has a certain image sensor, they'll usually stick to that camera. And even if they, let's say there's a new version, like somebody who's shot on, let's say, Auray Alexa, they'll usually stick to Auray Alexa. Now, if Auray releases the newer, let's say Auray Mira or Auray Alexa Mini, XT, whatever, the newer versions there, the better companies are going to release cameras that are just going to have a sensor that, yes, it's improved in many ways, maybe more light sensitive, all that stuff, but the sensor at the core of it behaves in the same way as the original sensor does. And what I mean by that is sort of how it handles contrast, latitude and things like that. And that's again because that's where having a light meter is going to come in really handy, is because you're going to get used to working with a certain film stock or these days to a certain film sensor, and then all you need is your light meter to walk around and kind of set up your scene very quickly. So anyway, let's say this is our Keylight and we can change it. I could adjust the brightness of it, obviously, but let's say it's stock, let's say it's like a natural light, so it's practical, whatever it is, I'm just going to leave it. So this is my basically camera settings, which I already have now adjusted with the camera. So my camera is already set to f5.6, ISO 800, which is exactly what it was showing me here, right? ISO 800, 1/30th, basically, or 30 frames per second, ISO, 800 at shutter, basically, a shutter angle 180 degrees. It's telling me to be at f5.6. That's what I set the camera to, because again, before I was getting ready for the show, that's what I did it. So I did this, and that's all great. Now when you start adding other lights, and that's where when you're communicating with your lighting team, it's going to be really helpful, because again, you don't have to be relying on getting a camera and seeing how it looks through camera and all that stuff. You're kind of going to go rely on your experience and just reading simple light values. Now another thing you got to understand also is because you're going to be usually communicating with an f-stops, you could sometimes go talk about within foot candles or things like that. So depending on who you're working with, some people might have a preference, but usually with f-stops. So for example, in my case, I know that trying to do like a standard, like I said, interview shot, and in this case, it looks very dramatic. What I mean by this is like the background's very dark here behind me, right? And also this side of my face is very, very dark. It's not very, it's just, it kind of, it doesn't look like a nice interview setup, right? Especially if you're doing something for television or things like that. If this was maybe like a drama kind of a film, then this might be good. In this case, it might actually be, let's say if it's a horror film, you might even want to get this to be even darker. And right now, we're actually getting a little bit of light here, basically reflected in our studio. Because the studio is not very big, so if I show you actually, guys, kind of how it looks, you'll see this is the studio. And I have my Keylight here. This is this LED. I have the camera is here. I don't know if you guys can see it. There it is. It has a monitor on it, and then there's my computer for streaming. Here's another light that I have, so that's what I'm going to be using as my fill light. And there behind me I have basically that one light that's kind of acting as my hair light, and then another one that's we're going to be using as a background light. So hair light and then a background light. But anyways, this is how the studio looks. I actually have some windows here that I didn't really black out. I kind of put the shades on it, but it still spills in a little bit of light. So we're getting maybe some ambient light, and we could try to kill this. But right now, if I just look at this, like I said, I'm getting this kind of a light. So I can now go and quickly with my light meter, just measure basically what's the amount of light here that we have basically coming in from this side. Now this is what I'm trying to measure is how much of basically I'm getting from the opposite side of my key light. How much kind of a fill light am I getting? To do that, you usually kind of want to block the key light or block all the other lights. Best way to do it is like this. That's where you see a lot of cinematographers do. So anyway, so I'm going to go like this, measure the light, and it's showing me that we're at f1.4. So basically 1.4, so it's actually a little bit more, almost like 3.5 stops under compared to what our key light was. And I know just from experience also working with this camera that at basically anything over 3 stops or down under, basically the difference, the contrast is pretty big. So it's pretty dark, like you can see, but it's not pitch black. You're still getting some light in there. So you really would want that to be, like if I were to completely like block it off, as in this case, like with my hand, you see like something, basically I under basically one f-stop. Then I know I'll be getting a really nice dark kind of a shadow, like super dramatic kind of a horror, shadow. And in this case, the only way to do that would be to actually bring in some black, basically dovetail or basically black material, black flags, and black it all off up here from this side. So I'm basically creating a negative fill. If you did that, then you would be able to darken it. But like I said, in our case, for an interview shot, we actually want to add a fill light. So I'm going to just turn on my light here. So this is my light. And now I turned it on. And let's say I'm going to just kind of adjust the thing. So right now I'm going to put up this light. Let's say this is how bright it is, right? I just turned it on. This is without it. This is kind of with just our key light. And now this is how it's looking right now with our fill light. And obviously, I mean, I can tell, that it's too bright and all that stuff. So it's not like I'm trying to fool you guys and make it seem like it's a thing, like it's perfectly adjusted. So it's obviously way too bright. But here's how I'm gonna again measure this. I'm gonna block with my hand. So I'm basically not getting any light reading from the key light. So I'm blocking up here, and I'm just gonna measure it. And it's telling me that I'm at f8 up here. With my current settings, I'm at f8. I can do the same thing up here. So here, so here it is. Oh. Let's measure this. So it's telling me, yep, over 160 foot candles. So if I go to this, 160, it is showing me, yep, 160 showing me again. I don't know if you guys will be able to pick it up, but basically a little bit over f8. This light meter seems to be a tiny bit more sensitive, maybe, or basically gives out higher values than this one. Tiny difference though. Anyways, so that's what it's showing me, also f8. So that means that since my main light is at f5.6, this is at f8, that means that now my fill light is actually one f-stop over, basically stronger than my key light. And here's where, again, like if you're working on a film set, you're probably going to set up your whole lighting. Let's see, especially if it's like a big scene. You're going to set up your lighting, and you're kind of going to tweak the lights as you're adjusting the cameras. But let's say if you're doing an interview setup, you might have one camera like we have here, another one off to the side getting, let's see, a different slightly angle of me or wider shot, things like that. So you don't want to have to kind of worry about how it looks in each camera. You kind of want to know first, okay, while even the camera, like I said, is getting ready, how is this going to look? Is this going to be good? Well, right now, if unless I had the camera, I wouldn't be able to even tell exactly, just by eye. I'm like, well, I know it's brighter than this, but how much brighter is this light? Well, with this, you know exactly how much brighter it is. It is basically one f-stop over. One f-stop basically means doubling the light or halving the light. So one f-stop over means you're increasing the amount of light by 2, or doubling it. If you go one step under, you're basically taking away half of the light. So in this case, I know, again, working with the sensor and all that stuff, I know that I'm kind of for a very kind of, like a very flat looking shot, but where I'm still getting some definition. In this case, for example, let's say we adjust this light to be exactly 5.6, like our key light. So it's going to be looking very, very flat because it's going to be identical on both sides, right? So here I'm going to read this. And okay, I'm going to decrease this light now. Let's go like this. And I think somewhere there. No, still need to go lower. Almost. Still need to decrease a bit. So somewhere there, I'm basically at f5.6.2. It's a little bit over. But anyways, so at f5.6, this one's f5.62. So I know right now, and looks like when I'm looking at it, yeah, it looks very flat, right? So meaning the fill light is the same strength now as this. So let's say if you wanted to have a flat looking lighting like this, then you know this way, okay, this light is good, and you can very quickly communicate to your team, because and that's in the first case I measured it at f basically 8. I could have just told basically my gaffer to decrease the amount of light in here, and told him, okay, you know what, I want this light to be basically one step lower. And the gaffer will right away know, okay, I need to decrease it by half, right? And that's kind of how you can quickly communicate with your lighting team. Because you don't want to be going in your camera and again setting up a camera and looking through the camera and having your actor standing like, it's just, that's kind of how you can quickly walk around the set, and that's how you usually will see cinematographers walking around and using a light meter. So that's where the big advantage is, and this is basically what I'm showing you right now is kind of, I would say, the more advanced techniques in terms of we're using a light meter to measure not just the amount of light or your key light for what your exposure should be, but the actual lighting ratios. In this case, like I said, I want to create kind of a nice little interview shot that looks, like I said, has some definitions, that doesn't look so flat. So in this case, let's say I'm going to underexpose this, or basically make my shadow side of the face, let's say one step under. It's going to be a very subtle effect, but you'll see a bit more dimension in the face. And again, especially because on this image sensor. So yeah, I'm going to decrease the amount of light somewhere here, let's say. And again, let's read this. So now we're at, where is it? F5. So still I'm gonna maybe go a little bit lower, basically, because yeah, I would probably want it to be like I can kind of see in the camera that it's still kind of looking flat. So probably want it to be like at, I would say f4 would be nice, because it's gonna be or even f4.5 somewhere there. But so right now we're at f3.5, actually, a little bit over f3.5. So that's about what, like one f step under our key light, right? Basically, yeah, it's like 1.5 kind of a f step under our 1.5 f step basically below our key light. So if you're looking at it now, let's say if I'm doing a standard shot, just kind of here looking at the camera, this is how I look, and and I think it's kind of hard because I don't have I have one monitor up there, but it's a little far. But I can definitely see some definition here on my face. Like, meaning this side is not it's not dark. It's there's some light there, but at the same time it's what do you call it? It looks kind of, it doesn't look so flat. There's some definition to the face. So that's how I think. I would say though, for something like, let's say if you're doing like a romantic comedy or a movie where you kind of a regular kind of a film where you want to have more, this definition doesn't look so flat, then I would probably want to decrease this even more. I would say by like 2 f steps. So like would be, this is 5.6 would be f2.8, this thing. So if this would be at f2.8, I think would create like even darker shadows, because 2 f steps is quite a bit of a difference, but it's not enough to basically where it's going to be like super contrasty on this image sensor. And again, this is something you got to get used to, is you got to get used to working with a certain image sensor, a certain camera, and do some tests. And that's why doing camera tests before a big film project is very helpful, especially when you're working with a new camera. Anyway, so now I'm going to decrease it here, the amount of light, and let's see now what we're getting. Okay, it's not enough. Let's try it like this. Oh, almost spot on. f2.8. Okay, so as you can see, this is the kind of light that we're getting now. So kind of nice. We're getting nice. You know, you definitely you see the shape to come to the face. You see the three-dimensionality because the lighting is not so flat. At the same time, though, it's not as dramatic or as dark as what we had before, which was this no fill light. You can see that was kind of more like a horror film. This is kind of like you see, just a nice sort of fill in. So it still looks. There's some dramaticness, there's three-dimensionality to the face, but I think so. That's how you can do it with the light meter, and you can quickly walk around. And again, partially it's going to be your experience working with a certain sensor and stuff, but also having a tool like this is going to be helpful. Now, for example, I can go and I'm going to just quickly measure the amount of light that we have there in the back. So let's go over there. So I'm getting yeah. So here, let me come back. So over there, I was getting basically f1.6. That's what I'm getting over there. So at f1.6, we're basically, I would say, was it, like 4 steps, what is it? 1, 2, 3, yeah, there was a, far. It's like, I would say 3.5, 4, what is it, like, because it's a little bit, it's not exactly f1.6, it's like 3.5, 4 steps under, right, that background. And again, that might be good. We might be saying, okay, let's say for a film, you want to, you want the background to be kind of more dramatic, so you can kind of see those little lights there. I have some little practical there, like a little lamp you can see. So you might be happy with it. But let's say, again, maybe you don't want it to make it look like it's, let's say, because right now it could look kind of, let's say, like it's like a night scene. Like I have some little bit of light coming in through here, but the rest of the room is dark. Well, if you want to add some light there, I have actually a background light kind of set up here behind me. So I'll turn that on and I can just increase or decrease the light. And again, the best way to do it is to kind of, again, come in here with the light meter. And because, again, this is, especially when before you even have your camera set up, that's where you can measure the light perfectly. But even if you have cameras and you have multiple cameras, you can quickly go on this and you can communicate to your lighting team. And you can tell them, okay, let's say in this case, I want it to feel so it's basically the background feels the same like the Keylight. So it feels like it's all lit by one kind of a light source, very equal. So I know this was at f5.6. I want my background to be at f5.6. So I can just basically tell quickly my camera team, tell my my gaffers, my grip basically, who are setting up the lights, where to put the lights, and tell them, okay, I want a background light there. Fill in that background. I want it to be at as f5.6, the same value as our Keylight. And they'll right away go and they'll know how to set it up and how to adjust the intensity of the light. The same thing when I'm telling my camera, basically my first AC, I could just tell them right away, okay, the Keylight is at f5.6 with our current aperture, our current shutter speed or shutter angle, and our ISO. So I would just tell them f5.6 and just keep it constant like that. And if I have 2 cameras, both of my ACs are gonna adjust it to those settings. So anyways, right now I'm gonna go here. And again, we'll measure the amount of light here that we have in the back. So it's still not bright enough, so I'm going to increase this. And you can see, so what I'm reading right now is actually f5.0. So basically it's not quite there. It should be f5.6. So meaning the background is a tiny bit darker. It's like less than half a step, not going to be a big difference. But meaning it's, if you wanted it to be, let's say a little bit brighter or the same brightness as our Keylight, then you got to tell your lighting team, okay, bring in another light or put in a stronger light or whatever, or they'll figure all that stuff out, because they'll know right away looking at it that, okay, it's not strong enough. That one light, Keylight or background light that I have, it's just not strong enough. It's basically it's at its maximum setting. But let's say you are happy with this. It's like half a step under. Let's say you wanna, again, romantic comedy you're shooting, and I'm your leading actor, and I'm maybe not the most romantic guy, but I'm gonna try my best here. But for that kind of a romantic comedy, you want some definition, but you don't want these dramatic kind of shadows like you have in like a horror film, right? And let's say this is supposed to be like a standard sort of a daylight scene. So I have my key light on my actor and on my background, more or less the same. I have, like I said, my fill light 2 steps under, so it's there creating definition, but it's kind of dramatic too. There's some shape to the face. And here it might be actually good because the background now is, like I said, half a step under, meaning it's just a little bit darker, but not so noticeably so that it still feels like we have just equal amount of light in the whole room. But yet my actor has basically more light. It's just kind of more accentuated, right, in this case. But let's say I want to do it maybe a little bit darker. Like let's say I want it to be 1 step under. So it's kind of even more, let's say for an interview, you might want to have the background a little bit darker to bring in even more attention to your leading actor. Well, in this case, again, if I'm at f5.6, then I know I'm going to be at what was it before? I was before at... See, one thing I don't like is my iPhone keeps on locking, and I got to keep on unlocking it. So that's one thing I don't like about this light meter, maybe. Well, you can change the settings in your phone, I guess. So yeah, I would probably want this to be at like f4, I would say, the background. So here, I'm just going to do the reading. And okay, somewhere there. Yeah. So there you can see now, and obviously, you got to keep something in mind, which I'll talk about in a second. So now we have this background. It's a little bit darker, basically by 1 f-step. So it's still, it looks semi, like I said, it still brings most of the attention to your foreground, to your subject. In this case, it's me. Your background is a little bit darker, but it doesn't feel so dark like we're in a dungeon or something. And that's kind of how you're going to work with these lights. Now, for example, quickly I'm going to turn on the last light, and then I can start answering your questions and kind of also talk about a few other important things. So I have my light there, like I said, in the back, which is our key light, or our hair light, or you can call it a hair light, or whatever you want to call it, because it can act as a hair light, or as a hair light, or it can also act as an edge light, basically. Something to separate me from the background. So here I'm going to turn it on. I already have it at maximum setting, so that's as strong as it's going to get. But now I can go to here, and you can see, being back here on my spot, I can again now measure what that light is doing. So again, I don't want it to get affected by our fill light, so it is at f4.5. So about like half a f-step basically lower than our key light. So it's good. It's going to create like a little bit of, as you can see here, it's creating that little bit of this rim here, a bit on my hair, but it's not like overly dramatic. If I wanted this, sometimes if you're doing like a really stylized, let's say, music video, that kind of a shoot, like those Jerry Bruckheimer kind of films, they'll usually put like a really strong key light. Like usually it's going to be like 2 steps even, or 1.5 steps over your key light, the edge light, I mean. So they pull it, so it's very dramatic. It kind of almost blows out into white, right? So in this case, I kind of want to have this. It kind of takes that darker side of my face, but it kind of helps separate it from the background. That's kind of how you do it. Especially if I turn off our fill light, you can see now that this one edge light really helps, right? It helps kind of, again, adds this little rim there, helps add 3-dimensionality to me, but also helps me separate from my background. Anyways, now I'm going to turn on our fill light. This is kind of how our lighting setup works. So that's kind of how, more or less, how you're going to be working, measuring light ratios. That's where this thing, a light meter, any light meter, is going to come in really handy. Because again, these are things that you cannot really do. Like when you're measuring right now, it would be very hard for you to do, even if you wanted to do spot metering up here, to do just spot meter how much this rim light is going to be. Like, is it going to be blowing out or not? In this case, we know it's not going to be blowing out. We're not going to have any blown out highlights, like especially if you're doing an edge light or a hair light for somebody who's bald. So then it would be not a hair light, I guess, but an edge light. In that case, you probably don't want that edge light to be as strong, because let's say if somebody who's really hairy, the light's not going to be as visible. But somebody who's bald, that light's going to be reflective and all that stuff. So in that case, you probably would want it maybe even lower, maybe like one step under your key light. So it provides a little rim, but it's not that strong. So those are the kind of things to keep in mind. But again, those are things that you're going to best measure with the light meter, because as you can see, you can quickly point it at this light here, click. I can get on my light readings, and I can also see the contrast basically of, and kind of figure out, okay, compared to my key light, how are the other things working, right? And the same thing if I, for example, I wanted to do, let's say, like a really dramatic scene, like let me go, for example, turn off the key light here. So I still have, as you can see, I still have there the background light, how I had it before, and I have the edge light, right? But I have my key light there like that, and let's say I'm going to increase my background light. I want to make it like really, really bright. So we'll go there, and I know all the way at the setting, what was it F4? I'm going to actually measure it quickly again. Let's say I'll turn off my fill light. So my key light and my fill lights are gone. I have this edge here, this rim, and this is kind of how it looks with the background, right? All the way up. Now let's see if I turn off the background even. You can see you might want like a very dramatic scene. Let's say maybe, I don't know, a crazy axe-wielding murderer is coming up to your actors, let's say, and he's going to be, again, you don't want to reveal his face, but you want to be able to see the shape of that of your subject, your actor. So in this case, you're still seeing kind of, you see those little practicals I have there, little LED lights. See this little lamp, so it feels kind of like a dark room. But again, you're not really seeing the face very well. Now there is actually still a bit of light. Part of it is because of the computer here. Part of it is because of this light here that I have, the windows that are kind of shining some light. So again, if I wanted to make it very dark, then again I would bring up my light meter and I would just start measuring the light up here that we're getting, this incident light, and I could start cutting it off by putting basically black flags in here to create a negative fill. So I could really make it dramatic. But let's say right now it's pretty dark, and it's just, again, kind of showing my outline with that hair light. So you can see this is how it's looking, right? Now let's say if you want it to be like, okay, so I'm in the dark, but the background is nicely exposed. Then in this case, again, I'm going to turn on the background. I'll go quickly measure the amount of light there. So we're at F5. So I would go quickly tell my camera team to just set it at F5. So in this case, I'll do it myself. And now, I'm out of focus, so I'll get back in my regular spot here. But you can basically see that the background now is properly exposed at F5. And that's kind of how, again, how you would be working with the stuff. Now, again, I'm going to bring back that light. Make it a bit darker there. Turn our fill light in here. And I'll change the settings back to what we had. And there we have it. Here's our scene back again, and I can again just quickly double check. Let's say if I want to make sure that these are correct readings. So we're at f5.6 here, so that's good. Here we're at a little bit under, I think. F2.8. So it's okay, 2 stops under f5.6, and then the background. Maybe I'll measure actually the hair light here. So the hair light somewhere here is f3.5, so half basically well one step under, a little bit more actually now, and the background is at f4, so basically one step under. So I think it's pretty good. And again, that's how you can think, how you can, by measuring the light ratios, how you can quickly build your scene and decide whether you want it to be dramatic or whether you want it to be, again, just kind of more, romantic comedy like this kind of shot is, or just for, like, let's say, an interview, right? Although for probably an interview, if I was doing an interview about, let's say, the subject is just me, then in that case I would probably bring the background light a little bit under still, like one step, maybe like a two-step difference. So it's kind of like almost like this, here fill light is kind of two steps under and the background two steps under. So the key light is really kind of, like I said, bringing attention to your main subject. But anyways, that's kind of how I would work with these lights and with a light meter. So now I'm going to kind of let you guys basically, ask me some questions. Hopefully you guys already have some questions here. And let me see actually here, put on my headphones so I can hear what's happening. And Lucas, any questions we have? Oh, hold on.
Hi everyone, sorry for joining late, but here, okay, so I've got a bunch of questions. Some of them people in the chat already answered, but maybe you can expand on, or maybe fill in the gaps. But from lots of questions here from Kevin from Car Galaxy Studios, and some good questions from him. Anyway, so here's one. Like in general, what ratio of wattage for your key light versus your fill light? And like, what's the ratio you would use? I guess you talk about different kind of scenes and so on, but what would be like, the ratios between the key light and the fill light and the background lights? Do you think you adjust that at this point?
The ratios, but for what though? I guess I'm asking, like is there specific?
Yeah, he didn't say. He says in general. So I guess you were talking about different settings. So I guess you addressed that, right? Because you're talking about like comedy, you're talking about interview setting. So I think that, do you think you've covered that one?
I guess, yeah.
Kevin, if you feel like there's still something that was not clear about that, then maybe ask a follow-up question. But
I guess here's what I would say is that when it comes to light ratios, it's going to be, I kind of already talked about it a little bit, but anyways, when it comes to light ratios, it's going to be very, very dependent on the sensor that you're working with, right? Because like I said, if you have a camera, let's say, that has a very low dynamic range, then you know that, let's say, two steps under, like in this case, the fill light here is two steps under my key light, it's going to look a lot more dramatic. It's just going to look a lot more flat, right? I mean, a lot more darker, right? So it's going to be less information here. I'm shooting on a nice camera, right? Ursa Mini 4.6K, and it has a 15 steps of dynamic range. So two steps under, and this is kind of like, back in the day when we're used to shooting with film, certain film stacks would have sort of like this, 14, 15 steps of dynamic range. You know that you're still getting some information there. So it means that, in post later on, when you're color grading that footage and adjusting it, you can, if you wanted to, you can still brighten up those shadows because there's still information there. You can brighten up those levels basically, and because you can also always darken them, right? So that's kind of one thing it gives you. But if you're working with a certain sensor, let's say, like if I was shooting this on the Panasonic GH4, then those two steps under, and actually here, I have the Panasonic GH4 here. I would have to adjust the camera settings, but here, I'm just going to kind of show you how it looks here. We have here. So here it is on the Panasonic GH4. So the angle doesn't quite match, but anyways, it's the settings are, well, I kind of just eyeball the exposure, so it's not going to be perfect. But you'll notice just how much more of a difference it is between the key light here. I'll try to bring the camera a bit closer. So like right now, it's say somewhere there the exposure is. Like there, you see the key light is kind of well exposed on my side, but here you'll notice that it's drastically darker than when you compare it to the Ursa Mini, right? Ursa Mini is just can handle those shadows a little bit better. Is basically what I'm trying to say, and so that's kind of where it's really going to be dependent is on the kind of sensor that you're working with. I would say the better sensors are usually the ones that have bigger dynamic range, because they just give you, because like I said, you can always go in, and now if I wanted to later on and decide, you know what, I want that to be a bit more dramatic, well, I can darken that a little bit more. So I know that like 2 stops under, my Keylight is going to be good. It will provide nice contrast ratio, but at the same time, it's still some information there, so I can pull that info out. But at the same time, with a certain other camera, you know that you got to be a lot more careful. Same thing with when you go over, right? You'll know that how much over you can go before it starts blowing out, right? So again, that's it's going to be very dependent on the camera that you're working with, and that's why it's also important to do camera tests with that specific camera and lenses also, because certain lenses will decrease the contrast because of they might have some artifacts that they introduce. But basically, will kind of make the image a bit more milky. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But again, some lenses are more contrasty, some are less contrasty. So take that camera, lens combination, do some tests, shoot it, and then you'll or if you just simply are shooting a bunch of projects on a certain camera, write it down or have little notes for yourself, so okay, we're shooting right now with the, let's say, Ursa Mini 4.6K, and I shot this shot, and I like how it looks, I like this contrast I got. What was the light reader reading, and basically you write it all down, so that later on, when you're looking at those shots in post, you'd be like, oh, I really like that effect. I like that contrast I created there. What was it? It was 2 stops on there. Okay, I know now 2 stops on there on this sensor is going to be good. And then later on, it's just going to be like, again, that's why a lot of DPs, once they're familiar with a certain camera, doesn't mean that they won't switch, but they're just going to be, usually they'll have like 2 or 3 cameras that they really like working with, and they're going to stick with those. If they have to work with a new camera, they'll usually end up doing tests before with that new camera. So that's one way of knowing it. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch, but just trying to keep up with all of them. Because there's a comment from Kevin regarding this question about I'll have to take a time to read it. So we'll move on to the next question, and then maybe we can go back to this one. But I think this is like okay, so again, from Kevin, question like what's the industry standard for communicating light intensity? Is it IRE? Is it wattage? Is it foot candles? Is it lumens? Is it f-stops? Or what's the most common way?
The most common way, it's hard to say, because it really depends on what movie set you are, and also which part of the world, really. Because there's going to be a thing. I would say f-stops is kind of like one that at least in my working experience, the people that I worked with, was very common. Because again, it's just something that like people can relate to, because then they don't know, they sort of have like an image right away in their head of like, okay, f5.6, right? I'm getting with whatever the certain settings that you have already preset. They'll know that that's like the base for that camera, or let's say the DP decided that we're going to be like, in this case, we're locked to the certain ISO. In this case, ISO 800, because it's the native ISO. And let's say you're shooting a 180-degree shutter, meaning those two things don't change. So then the only way you can adjust your exposure is by aperture or by putting ND filters, right? So that's kind of why you're going to be sort of stuck with those settings, and then you're going to just be going by that. So then already you'll read it and you go, okay, my Keylight is like this, or this is my base basically setting, and then now I'm just reading the aperture. And let's say that your fastest lens, let's say in this case, my fastest lens was f5.6. I know that my Keylight, if I wanted to have a nicely exposed shot, my Keylight cannot be lower than f5.6. So I know that. But let's say if you have a lens that can go down, be even faster, like let's say don't go down to f1.4. Well, then again, you know that you can go a bit lower with that Keylight. It doesn't have to be so bright, because you can compensate with the camera. So those are the kind of things. But yeah, foot candles is another one that's very popular, and the f-stops. That's the main thing, I think. I usually communicated with f-stops, and I know most DPs that I've worked with, whether I was a director or when I was starting out and I was helping out other DPs, they'll usually say f-stops, and because of that, I got used to working with f-stops, because again, it's relevant to your camera settings or to your aperture. And that's kind of the reason why that's the most common one. But I've seen people also use foot candles, especially when communicating with, let's say, the gaffer or something like that. Next question.
All right, so this is like a follow-up question, which we pretty much answered, but maybe we can again add a little bit to it. In terms of, because for me, not being a cinematographer, when I hear f-stop, I'm thinking, okay, camera settings, and then when you're looking at light and talking about f-stop, it's still kind of not natural for me. The first So then I started thinking, as you were explaining, how does it relate to the camera settings? And I guess you just explained.
Yeah.
I guess the main thing is like that. So you set the main light, the key light, to be, you wanted the same f-stop on that one as in the camera, I guess. But here is a question from NV creators in Seeing.
Okay.
So you was looking at one of the settings here, and he saw that you had 4 different readings of the f-stop, and he says, so what f-stop at the end should he set in the camera? Should he take? And he says, should I be taking in an average of these settings?
No.
And then so.
So yeah, so here's another big good thing about, like I said, advantage of a light meter versus a camera built-in thing, because even though you can do spot metering, you won't be able to spot meter like I said, the rim line and little details like that. But also, let's say you already have your framing, you don't want to move the camera, you don't want to be pointing it at different parts of the scene. The light meter, you're reading a specific light at a specific place in your scene, because obviously that key light, if I go back further, like I'm further from that light, that key light suddenly is going to decrease in intensity, right? So what you want to be doing is, in camera, your camera is going to measure an average of all of the whole scene. What basically, like, it will basically take, this part of the shot, this one. Like, let's say if I had, let's say the scene is very bright, but I have a black T-shirt, black couch. Let's say the wall is, very almost black or black. Well, then the camera, it doesn't know, because it's not reading the actual light, it's reading the reflected light. Well, since black basically absorbs all this light, it doesn't reflect much. In the camera, the light meter is going to be not getting much light that reflect the light, and it's going to be telling you it's underexposed. Increase the light. Well, you don't want that. The light increase, because once your actor steps in, that that black has to look black, but he has to look well exposed, right? So that's again where you're reading the incident light, or basically they're reading it directly from the light source. So in this case, you will have to kind of decide, like, let's say if this was your scene, you just show up, that's how it's lit, it's all practicals, right? And you can't change those lights. So you just want to know, what the hell should be my camera setting? Well, decide what's the main part of your scene and how you want it to be exposed. Do you want it to be like perfectly exposed? Do you want it maybe, because sometimes you might want to have, like, let's say one part of the image be brighter than the thing. Like, let's say I want the background to be nice and bright and well exposed, but the actor, I want him to be a bit darker, a bit more dramatic, right? You might want that. So you kind of have to decide. So in this case, I'm sitting up here, and like I said, I have one light, second light up here, my fill light. I have a hair light here going on my hair here on my edge. And then I also have a background light there. So what I really care about, though, is I don't care about how the other things look. I want to know that this key light that's lighting my face now, that is nicely exposed. So what I'm going to do is, again, turn on the light meter. There. Log me into the phone. Damn you, Apple. The fingerprint. Okay, there it is. All right, so I'm in my Lumu app, so I'm just going to point this at the thing. And again, I'm blocking off this light, because if I was measuring this would basically, it's a ring, or it's like a 180 degrees, like a sphere, right? Semi-sphere, half a sphere. So meaning it's going to be reading the lights from all these angles. So if I measure the light up here, it's going to tell me at 30 frames per second, which is what my camera is set to right now, 180 degree shutter, ISO 800, because I've already decided on those settings because of the reasons why I told you guys, and I don't want to mess with those settings. It's telling me right now my f-stop should be at, what is this here? F5, basically. And that's the reason for this is because it's reading our fill light. But I don't care about the fill light. I know it's going to add a little bit, but it's mainly adding to the darker side. I care about this key light. So I'm going to block this light here, measure this, and what am I getting here? It's F5.6 basically. We're getting a little bit over, actually. So basically, this is my setting. So I know that I want this thing to be at F5.6. Because again, this is a little bit darker, and so if I read it like this, only half of the dome is getting the key light, the other half is getting the shadow side. So at F5, I would be making it a bit brighter, meaning I'm going to brighten up the shadowy side. I don't want to do that. I want to just make sure that my key light looks nice, it's perfect, and this side is just whatever is going to be, however dark is going to be, that's how it's dark is going to be, and then I can adjust my fill light, let's say. In this case, I have the whole scene ready, so again, I'm reading just the key light in this case. Now, that doesn't mean, and like I said, usually the key light is... Again,
so at this point, you set the camera to F5.6.
Yeah, because the key light is showing me that. Now, again, if, let's say if I moved in really close...
Sorry again. But then, when you're measuring in that app, you've said you have the same shutter and
Yeah, that doesn't
and
change.
ISO as in the camera, right?
Yeah, because usually as a cinematographer, you, like I said, you kind of want to be, not always, but usually you decide to work in a native ISO of your camera because that's where the camera performs the best. So you'll figure out, okay, in this camera it's ISO 800, boom. I put that in the app because I can change that, right? And like I said, in certain cameras, you can keep on changing it. Like if I put in here, that I want to shoot at ISO, let's say 400, then it's telling me now suddenly my f-stop should be f4.0. So it's automatically updates. But I'm going to, like I said, ISO 800, and because as a DP, I know that that's where the camera performs the best. Next thing I know is, for example, I'm deciding on my shutter angle or shutter speed, and in cinema cameras, you're measuring it in angles. So I know usually the typical shutter angle is going to be 180 degree shutter, or basically 2 times your frame rate. So since my frame rate is 30 frames per second right now, double that, the shutter speed will be 1/60th, of a second shutter speed. Or basically easier is just the way the cinema is done, is you just say 180 degree shutter. So I put in here in my shutter angle, which by the way in this app you can change it to angles, to degrees, whatever. So you can work with any camera. So I put that, and I know my frame rate is at 30 frames per second. I'm not changing that, and that's the reason why usually you're going to be changing the f-stops, is because you don't want to be messing with the other settings. Those are like really the creative things that you decided on, that you know already. You don't want different looking motion, so you want 180 degree shutter. You want whatever the frame rate is. If you're not shooting slow motion, then it's going to be, in this case, 30 frames per second, or I could be putting it 24 frames per second if I'm shooting standard cinema, and ISO 800, and then I'm just worrying about my f-stop. Doesn't mean that I have to adjust the f-stops or the aperture on the lens. I could be decreasing that by putting NDs. For example, like let's say if right now my camera, I wanted the camera to have a really shallow depth of field. So let's say I would go from let's say again from f 5.6, I want to go down to f 2.8. Let's say 2 stops on there, right? So 2 stops on there is going to create like a nicer, shallower depth of field. Well, then I know I need to put enough ND filters to stop down by 2 f-stops. So that's what I would tell my AC to be like, okay, set the camera to f basically 2.8, and then all the other settings how we had it, the base settings. So now when he knows, when I tell him, okay, the reading is at f 5.6, since the camera set it to f 2.8, he knows he needs to put stop down 2 f-stops basically. So he needs to put ND filters that strength, right? So that's kind of how you'd be kind of working with it. Now, like I said, you're not always going to be setting your camera setting to your Keylight, because it depends on what's the most important thing. Like let's say in this case, I'm doing a typical interview shot, so my Keylight, yeah, I care about it being well exposed. But let's say, I don't know, I want it to be like a more dramatic scene that's kind of lit by those lights here from the windows and that kind of a hair light that I have. Then I might want to set the exposure so that all that stuff, and let's say the background looks nice, and I'm a little bit darker, right? Things like that. So that's kind of what you take in account. If you wanted the background to look nice, and not, let's say, worry about the Keylight, then for example, if I was literally gonna go there in the background and that was gonna be my shot right now, then I'm gonna go right now and just quickly show you. So I'm gonna speak a bit louder so you guys can hear me, but. So here, now I'm measuring everything here, what the light is from all the light sources that are kind of falling. So basically I'm at f, is it 3.2? So I'm going to change my camera settings. And I adjust the focus, obviously, and it should be a well-exposed shot, basically, right now, of me here, right? So that's kind of how you would do it, because your subject is going to be here. But if the subject is going to go there, then you want to adjust it accordingly. All right, so I think we should be kind of wrapping it up soon, but hopefully that answers the questions for you guys.
I think we answered like the main thing, because that was
Yeah, but if there's any other questions, then maybe let me know.
Yeah, some people, well, people are asking whether that this will be available to watch afterwards, so they can, go through the explanations
Yes.
again, because sometimes there's a lot of information.
It's going to be both
So
on YouTube and on my Facebook page, so you can definitely watch it later on. Again, is there any other questions on from both
yeah,
from
like
taking
what
questions
other
from Facebook or YouTube?
is there any app like for other than for Android, like you're using for on an iPhone? Is there anything for Android?
For Android, as far as I know, Lumu is working on this basically version of it, but for Android. But when that's going to come out, I don't know. There are apps that are basically, but they're going to be spot basically metering. That's the whole problem, is that you're doing spot metering, which is which is still better than walking around with your camera, right? With your big camera. But basically, spot metering. I mean, you can install there. Well, no, actually, this app right now is only for Android, but there are other spot metering apps for basically. That's what you're going to look for, a spot meter, and then all you're going to do is then you're going to be pointing your camera basically here at your scene. The advantage of that is that you can get in really close, let's say to that back wall, or here you can put like your hand or something and measure just what's the light here. But it's not the same. You kind of want to have a light meter. So either wait till Lumo comes out with this for Android, and I hope they do, because I literally bought this iPhone so I could use this, because it's a really cool thing. But it's like I don't use Android. I mean, I don't use iOS. I use Android regularly. But again, you can buy these things so cheaply, like 60, 80 bucks used. So look around for this one. And again, for standard kind of lighting setup, this is going to be more than sufficient. It gives you all the settings. It's a little slow, yes. There's another one from Sekonic that has the little dome. Like it will do incident light metering, and that's you can also buy it for like $100 used. So maybe I'll post the link for that on in the description of the video afterwards. I gotta look it up. I forgot the model name. But I would say that's the big advantage of having, again, a light meter. You can walk around your scene, and again, let's say for example, if you wanted to get like a scene that's on a steady cam, right? And you want to have, let's say, walking from that back wall here, walking to here. Let's say maybe walking. I have a little hallway there, walking through there. Well, there, let's say, once you decide on your camera settings, let's say you go, okay, we're gonna have 180 degree shutter, ISO 800, because that's our camera's native ISO. And then let's say we're on a steady cam, we don't want the shallow focus to be like too shallow, because then it's gonna be impossible for the focus puller to adjust. Let's say we're gonna go at f5.6. Then that, let's say in this case here, f5.6 works. But in this case, then I would have the background light adjusted a little bit brighter so that the lighting doesn't change. Or if it does change, let's say with a certain camera, if it goes step under, like right now, the background is about 1.5 step under. I know it's not so dramatic, so 1 step or 1.5 step under on this image sensor, yeah, the actor's going to get a bit darker as he walks from one part of the scene to another, but it's going to be, it might add actually to kind of make the scene more dynamic, so it doesn't look so flat all the time, the lighting. And you're still seeing a nice exposure, and if anything, you can even, if you wanted to equalize that so the lighting doesn't change, so it doesn't get brighter and darker as the actor walks through the scene, you have enough of exposure there, and you can later on in post actually adjust the brightness of it, basically, of your shot, because you have just enough information there, because you're just one step underexposing, let's say. So those are the kind of things that, again, that a light meter is going to be very handy for. And again, it's just doesn't replace a lot of things. Now, here's where a light meter does not come in handy, and that's where, especially first of all, when you're shooting with a really small team and you yourself are operating the camera and all that stuff, and you're, let's say, doing handhelding like stuff. If you're doing wedding videos, or if you're doing, let's say, like real run and gun documentaries where there's no way in place that you can set up lights, but where you even have a camera team, it's probably going to be very difficult for you to use a light meter. Sometimes there'll still be an advantage to doing it, but like, especially if you're doing, I know some people who do wedding videos, they'll show up at a church or location and they'll look around and measure light, and they'll tell right away the bride and groom, like, okay, is there other lights we can turn on at this church? Because if we're just working with the lights that we have here, it's too dark. I cannot get a good video. And so they'll tell right away, and that's where sometimes they'll talk to the church, and church will tell them, oh, we have other stage lights, or we can bring in other lights, or you then tell, let's say, the church, okay, can I bring in these and these lights and set them up here before the ceremony? So those are the kind of things that, again, you can do with a light meter. But Where a light meter is not going to be handy is where you have those real small kind of run and gun camera packages, and especially when you have things like, for example, variable ND filters, or using certain of these like specialty lenses that really throw off the camera reader. Basically, they're not very accurate when it comes to the f-stop readings that they provide. Because like, let's say if you have a variable ND filter, you don't know what the hell that setting is. You're just adjusting it to make it brighter or darker. It doesn't tell you on the ND filter on the actual ring what the f-stops is that you're basically decreasing now. So because of that, then you don't know what the hell should your camera settings be, right? So that's where you definitely would not be using a light meter, at least for doing your final camera settings. You can still use it to kind of just overall balance the light in your scene, but later on you adjust your exposure and that's it. You just leave it, but you kind of have to eyeball it. But that's again why on a like a film set or an actual TV set, you're never going to see anybody using a variable ND filter. That's where they're going to have like real good quality ND filters that equally black the all frequencies of light, so they don't throw out the different colors, but also that are very if they're rated at, let's say 0.3 or whatever, 0.6, for example, like 0.3 ND filter that decreases by 1 f-stop, right? 0.6 is 2 f-stops, 0.9 is 3 f-stops. So you know exactly that it's like that's exactly how how many stops basically you're blocking, right? So anyways, that's hopefully that answers all the questions. So any other questions, let me know.
Yeah, do you have I think you showed 3 different meters. Which one is the one you use most often?
Right now it's the Lumu, because
All
it's
right.
just so easy. Comes with like a little pouch actually that you like attach it to your belt, take this off and put it in there. Like, I love everything about this little thing, and the fact that it has a color meter here, which I'm not going to get into, but basically you can, without guessing what your color temperature on your camera should be, you just read it and it will tell you. That's what it's amazing for. The only thing I don't like about it is that you got to make sure your phone is charged. So I carry with me portable battery packs, which I did a video about it and I kind of showed. Another thing is what's it called? Is that it is a little like, see, it's a lightning connector. I'm not gonna say this thing's gonna break off, but if you put this in your pocket like this and you sat, let's say, and you could technically break this off. So I always take it off when I'm not using it. I don't just leave it like that. With a light meter like this, I mean, these things are sturdy. I guess I've had this for 20 years. Throw it in your pocket, or it comes actually with like a little pouch that you can carry with you. Where is this pouch? Here it is. So you have this pouch here, and you put it to your belt, and you just have it, and there it's safe, right? So you can do that. You can get that, I guess, for your phone too, or actually that pouch could even carry the phone with the Lumu. So you could get something like that. But that's the only disadvantage, I would say, of the Lumu. But otherwise, it's amazing because it measures a lot of different things. You have a lot of customization there, and they're going to be improving the app. So they're adding, based on user feedback, if you tell them, they're adding constantly new features to the app. So that's a cool thing. Plus, like I said, you can measure color temperature.
So it does accurately measure the color temperature?
Yes. I've seen actually some videos that some people were complaining that it's not so much with the as a light meter works great, but some people had problems with the light, the color temperature actually. Yeah. And in my experience, I had no problems. The color temperature was spot on, and I was actually doing the same tests and all that stuff, and again, it worked no problem. And you got to keep in mind that this is only right now. If you get it on sale, $250. You get a light meter with all these advanced features, plus you get a color meter. A color meter alone is going to cost you over $1,000. So, it's a very good value, right? So if you think about it.
Okay, is there any other light meters, like budget light meters that you can recommend? There's somebody here, I think it was Trevor Pinnocky, he was recommending the Sekonic 308, or he was saying that's an affordable meter. But anything that comes to mind?
I think that's the 308 is the one that I was talking about that has the dome. Actually has a spot metering too, but it's not as it's a little bit limited. But anyways, you're usually going to be using the instant light meter anyways. And I think that's the one that's like, again, you can buy it for sale for like, on used $80, $100. So I'll provide a link to that. But that's the other one that I was talking about. It's also Sekonic. Otherwise, I don't know any other ones that that I've used. I'm sure there are, but ones that I've used, I've only used a few light meters. So ones that I can recommend. And honestly, the cheapest one is going to be this one. So that's, again, just that's the one that I know.
Okay, just maybe can squeeze in a question or two, but So here, what's the difference between using a light meter and false color? So right away, I guess I can say false color is what your camera sees. So you're not able to tell with this part of the scene what you're getting, and right?
Yeah,
That's the best way to explain it.
Yeah, there's nothing else to say. It's just what your camera sees, and there's some great things about it. And I'll do a video about false color, but
you do use it. You do use false color.
I do use it. I do use false color for like the final things because you can see exactly which part of the image what's happening. But the reason why I don't still just abandon a light meter is because when you show up to your set, especially during location scouting, but even once you're on the beginning of the day of the shoot, you don't want to be worrying about the camera. You don't want to be worrying about setting up a monitor, having false color, because by the time you have your camera package built and you have your monitor set up and all that stuff, and you put the camera more or less in the right angle, right? It's too late for the lighting team to start working. Like the lighting team has to work 2 or 3 hours before, get your lighting, get everything in order. So you have to be able to just show up quickly with your light meter, do all your readings, tell them what you want, and then boom, they start setting all that up while you're working with the camera.
I think it's a good time to end, but again, there's a chance to ask more questions in the comments of the video. So
yes, I'm going to definitely be following up. I'm going to stay online for like another probably half hour right now, but then for the next 2 days I'll also be checking. Like tonight I'll check some more questions. So both on Facebook here, my Facebook page, so facebook.com/Tom Antos Films, or my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Tom Antos. Go and I'm going to be answering questions on this video, so just leave your comments, and that's it. And next week I'm gonna try to do another fun sort of a live show, but I will get to the submissions. This today just kind of took longer, so I don't want to get get into submissions so late into the show, but trying to keep it usually with an hour and a half. Today we started a little bit later, but anyways, hopefully you guys enjoy this tutorial. And again, if you have any other topics you want me to do, I can do them live and answer your questions. I think it's always best. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Thank you and bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.